against than any one of us can muster or overcome. But I tell you what, having been traveling the state since that decision, and being in San Antonio, being in Austin, being in smaller communities in Travis County, being here with you today in Boerne tonight, in Pearland, Texas, in Brazoria County, you have told me and have shown the rest of this state that the antidote to despair is action. Committing ourselves to the fight ahead and making sure that we win this election is what it's all about. We know that this Supreme Court decision is a bad one. We know that what Greg Abbott is doing to the women of the state of Texas, that trigger bill that he signed last year that will go into effect 30 days after the Supreme Court decision, just to make sure everyone's really clear on the facts, it will outlaw and criminalize abortion beginning at conception, with no exception for rape, with no exception for incest. And that will be the law of the land right here in the state of Texas. When you add to that the fact that we are at the epicenter of a maternal mortality crisis that is 3 times as deadly for black women in the state of Texas, a maternal mortality crisis that puts us as one of the deadliest states in the country, one of the deadliest places to be a woman in the developed world right now. As more of these reproductive health care clinics close down, not only is it harder to get your still constitutional right to an abortion, but try getting a cervical cancer screening or seeing a family planning provider, or in the least insured state in the country, just seeing a medical provider at all. That helps to explain the cruelty that we are seeing that's producing the death, the devastation, and the suffering that so many women in Texas are needlessly enduring. So I understand just how bad this is for us, but I think we also all understand that the only way to overcome it is to look to each other, because there is no cavalry riding to our rescue. You know, Democrats have a majority in the United States House of Representatives. They have a majority in the United States Senate. They are in the White House right now, and yet with all of that political power, they were unable to secure and protect this right to full reproductive health care freedom. This, as Justice Alito said in that draft opinion, is coming back to the states. And if that fight is going to be won or lost in the states, there is no state, ladies and gentlemen, that is any more important than the state of Texas. With 30 million people living here, there are more women who will be affected by the outcome of this decision than anywhere else. This one is on us. It is on all of us. And I tell you what, though this might fly in the face of conventional wisdom and what all the other politicians and prognosticators and pundits are trying to tell us about what we can or cannot do, I know that we've got this one, and I'll tell you why. Prior to 1973, as you all know, abortion was against the law right here in the state of Texas. And it wasn't someone from outside of our state who won that right for the people of Texas. It was our fellow Texans. In fact, it was Jane Roe, Roe versus Wade, who was from the state of Texas. Pero además, and just as, if not more importantly, the 2 women who successfully prosecuted her case before the Supreme Court, Sarah Weddington, born in Abilene, Texas, of all places, and Linda Coffey, who lives in Dallas, Texas today, those 2 women successfully argued that landmark case that changed for the last 49 years the law of the land and our understanding of the Constitution, and the realization that if those men, and they were all men back in the late 18th century, did not explicitly confer a right on the people of this country, there is still a way to see within that Constitution that we have the right to our privacy, to our own reproductive health care decisions, to marry the person that we want to marry, to be with the person that we want to be with, because we understand the logical conclusion of this decision, because it doesn't just stop at abortion. It could stop at gay marriage. It could go beyond gay marriage. It could be interracial dating and marriage as well. Those aren't explicitly conferred in the Constitution either. It is just our interpretation through the people of this country and their representatives in Congress and those members of the Supreme Court who ultimately are accountable to us in this great democracy. That's how we've made these decisions, but none of those decisions are final. These victories are never fully won. We must always fight. If I've learned anything over the last 4 or 5 years, it is that truth. And that fight exists nowhere more so than it does in Texas. So just know this. Not only is it possible for us to do this, to overcome and to win, but we've actually done it before. Sarah Weddington, Linda Coffey, Jane Roe, against much tougher odds right here in the very same state. Those of you concerned about our democracy, well, you should be. This is the toughest state in the nation in which to cast a ballot, in which to register to vote. You've got to be a volunteer deputy registrar, registered in the very county in which you want to add someone to the rolls, and you got to go do that 254 times if you want to register people across the state of Texas. There's no online voter registration. Our governor, this legislature, have made it so hard for so many to cast a ballot. When you see people standing 6 hours deep outside of a polling place, outside of Texas Southern University in Houston, Texas, that wonderful historically black college, part of you swells with pride. Goddamn, I'm so grateful that they're willing to do that. But most of you should feel the deep shame that I feel that we ask anybody to subject themselves to 6 hours in this kind of heat and this kind of sun in order to freely and fairly determine who will represent them in positions of power and public trust in their community, in this state, and across this country. 750 polling places have been closed down in the state of Texas over the last 10 years, most of them in the fastest growing black and brown neighborhoods in the state of Texas. When you add to that voter ID laws that allow you, when we used to have a license to carry program in the state of Texas, to use your license to carry a firearm to prove who you are at the polling place, but we won't allow you to use your student ID at the University of Texas to prove who you are at the polling place. That tells you who is supposed to vote and who is not supposed to vote in the state of Texas. When you have one ballot drop-off box per county, in the middle of the pandemic that took 90,000 lives in this state, absolutely unnecessarily. In a county like Harris, with more than 5 million people, you might have to drive clear across that county to drop off that ballot. And you know what? There's a great chance that a lot of people said, to hell with it. I just don't want to do it. I don't want to risk it. I'm not going to vote. That was the intention and the outcome. 7 million of our fellow Texans failed to cast a ballot in 2020, the most consequential election of our lifetimes up to that point, not because they're lazy, not because they lack any love for this great democracy, but because we have designed the system this way. We've rigged it such that some people are favored over others. Political power conferred to some at the expense of those who've always been the most vulnerable, the most neglected, the forgotten, the spoken for, the written off, and the taken for granted. I'll tell you what, in this campaign, those targets of voter suppression are the very people whose doors we are knocking on right now to invite them into this democracy. And I want you to be part of that effort. We're going to overcome this. 1923, the Texas state legislature outlawed voting for black Texans. I'm not making this up. Read your history on this one. They wrote it down. It was state statute. If you were an African American in the state of Texas, you were not allowed to participate in our elections. It took 21 years to overcome that. And the help did not come from outside of Texas. Dr. Lawrence Nixon in El Paso, Texas, brought suit, took it all the way to the Supreme Court, the highest law of the land, and won not one, but 2 signal Supreme Court victories, brought home ultimately in 1944 by Lonnie Smith, also of Texas. He happened to be from Houston. 21 years, their courage, their persistence, their strength, their unwillingness to give up in the face of the odds, that's what ultimately reintegrated our elections in the state of Texas. So when you see this attack on democracy in this great state, and it's very, very real, please know that we have the power to overcome it. Not only is it possible, we've done it before under much greater odds. Last point I want to make. In this least insured state in the country, made all the more dangerous by these attacks on women, on their reproductive health care, just on their lives, if we're going to be honest with it. There are people who are unnecessarily dying right now of curable cancers, dying of diabetes, dying of the flu in the year of our Lord, 2022, because they don't have the ability to see a doctor or to fill a prescription or take themselves to a mental health care provider to be healthy enough and well enough to live to their full potential, to work that job, start that business, finish that education, raise that family, run for office, whatever you were placed on the planet to do. I just want you to be healthy enough to do that. But this governor, Greg Abbott, has rejected $10 billion a year of Medicaid expansion money, which is not money that fell from the sky or grew on trees. It is your federal income taxes paid by you and your fellow Texans, sent up to Washington, D.C., that has every right to come right back to the state, but right now it's going to California, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas, New Mexico, everywhere but the state of Texas. We may think, because we've been the least insured state in the country for so long, this is our fate, this is our future, this is our fortune, this is just the way it's got to be in Texas. Get used to it. Well, let me remind you of this. The reason that we have Medicaid in the first place is because of Texas. The first Texan president, Lyndon Baines Johnson, signed Medicaid into law in 1965. We own this thing. We came up with it in the first place. Know this, when we win this race, we're going to make sure that the first thing that we do is work with our colleagues, Democrats, Republicans alike, to take yes for an answer, to bring that $10 billion down, to hire more providers, to connect more people with care, and never again accept as a fact and as our fate that people have to die these unnecessary deaths, that the largest provider of mental health care services in the state of Texas has to be the county jail system, which it is today. And what does that say about us? We can overcome this because not only is it possible, we've overcome it before against much longer odds. And I'll tell you what, when we do this, when we win this race, we'll be able to focus on the big things that you and I want to be able to do together. And in fact, not just you and I as Democrats, but you and I as Texans, because I tell you what, Republicans and independents alike agree on these things. We want to make sure, for example, point number one, that the best jobs in the United States of America are created right here in the state of Texas. In a state where the minimum wage today is still $7.25 an hour, we got to get it up to $15 as soon as we can. Because that's the only way you're going to make ends meet, the only way you're going to keep a roof over your head, and the only way you're going to put food on the table and be able to provide for your kids. That's if you can afford to do it on one job. But what if we make sure that there is no obstacle in the way of those who want to work those jobs? That we ensure that they get the best possible education, that if they want to join a union, they're able to join that union. If they want to be able to pursue a nursing degree, or medical education, that we wipe clear the debt in their way so that they can better themselves and then better all of us in the process. If they want to teach school, let's make sure that we treat them with the respect that they deserve so that they join that profession and unlock that lifelong love of learning with our kids as well. And when it comes to energy, we're so damn proud of those who work in the energy industry in this state. Venezuela, from Iraq, from the Middle East, from Russia, for that matter, and I'm grateful for it. In fact, we drove here today in a Chrysler minivan. Never thought I'd be saying those words when I was a younger man, but I love it. We can get all our people in there, all our gear, but it burns gasoline. And as long as that's the way that we're getting around, I want to make sure that we're producing the energy resources we need right here in the state, and those jobs come to the state. But I also want to make sure that we expand our energy leadership. Right now today, Texas is #1 in the country in the generation of wind power, and that's great. But I want us to be #1 in solar. I want us to be #1 in geothermal. I want us to be #1 in hydrogen. And I want us to be number one in creating the high value, high wage, high skilled jobs that come with this energy revolution that we are starting right here in the state of Texas. We give people jobs that pay, that provide function and purpose in their lives, and we lead the fight against climate change before it's too late. No state is better prepared to lead on this than ours here. Second point, and this is another one that I know we can agree on, because whether I'm here in Boerne, whether I'm in the Panhandle in Dalhart or Amarillo, whether I'm in San Angelo, in that part of West Texas that we in El Paso call East Texas, folks want to make sure that we have a world-class system of public education. And listen, there's a lot that goes into it, right? Driving here to this town hall in this beautiful amphitheater, I passed by the Boerne Middle School, and that's a beautiful building. Looks like a lot of your taxpayer dollars went into it. I'm sure it is wired with the latest technology, and we love that. That's going to help our kids learn even better. But the buildings, the technology, the bells and the whistles, all of that pales in comparison to the impact that the educator is going to have in the lives of those kids. That classroom teacher, that school counselor, that librarian, that nurse, those men and women who deliver to those children. I tell you what, it's not just reading, writing, and arithmetic, as important as those are. After 2 years of this pandemic, where so many of these kids have lost a grandparent, where their folks may have lost their job, where they might have even lost their home and they're bouncing from one couch to the next night after night, those educators, those teachers are literally keeping those kids alive right now. And I know that from listening to them. And they say, hey, Beto, given everything that's going on, the last thing that I need to be worried about is a high-stakes, high-pressure test. Why don't we cancel the STAR so that I can focus on those kids and make sure that they are okay? And then if we're going to assess our performance, and she says, I want that, let's replace the STAR with something that's truly a diagnostic that helps me do a better job because I want to do a better job, helps those kids get the resources that they need, is not used as a punitive tool to go after schools and withdraw resources from the ones who need it the most. Let's make sure that we're smart about getting help where it's needed. Right here in Boerne, the educator on average is underpaid by $8,400 a year against her counterpart nationally. Just to get to even. I'm not talking about best of the best, which is what I want, but just to get to even, we're $8,400 down. That may help explain, as you see this in county after county across the state of Texas, why we are losing teachers by the thousands in this state. My 11-year-old, who goes to the same great public elementary school that I went to, Mesita Elementary, in his 5th grade classroom, they have yet to have a permanent classroom teacher. We're now in May. The year started in August. He's on his 4th substitute. God bless the substitutes. But they are not going to have the power because they don't have the consistency, the relationships. They're replaced month in and month out to really deliver and connect with those kids. If I were governor right now, I would make sure that those teachers are paid enough not to have to take on a second job, that they're treated with the respect and the dignity that they have earned and that they deserve. And we give them every reason to stay in that profession and to continue to connect with those kids, and we get the hell out of the way instead of saying this is the version of history that you can teach. Or how about this? I want you to, our governor is now asking educators to turn in the parents of transgender kids to be pursued for child abuse. And you know that the ultimate outcome of that is that if that is successfully prosecuted, that child is taken from those loving parents. And I've met these parents across the state. No one loves their kids more than those parents who are trying to help them navigate one of the most difficult things that a child can go through, that a family can go through, and send them into a foster care system where there are 30,000 kids right now. That system's so badly managed and so badly defunded by this governor that last year, 100 kids in the state of Texas died in our custody and our care. Hundreds more were trafficked right under our eyes because we failed to make them a priority because our governor was more intent on scoring political points on the backs of the most vulnerable among us. Let me tell you what, when we win this thing, we're prioritizing public education. We're fixing child protective services. We are going to celebrate those families whose kids are trying to do the right thing for themselves. And we're going to remind everyone Texas is big enough for all of us. We love you if you live here. And last point that I think we can all get around, and that's the ability to just be healthy and to just be well. And I see members of the medical profession who are here, these brave women and men who over the last couple of years literally put their lives on the line for all of us. You know, we patted them on the back, we clapped, we tweeted, we posted on Facebook. They're still after it though, long after that initial heroism is forgotten by so many of our neighbors and our friends and our family. I want to make sure that we've got their back. I want to make sure that they are paid enough. I want to make sure that they're respected. I want to make sure that we draw down that Medicaid money, but then also reform Medicaid so that it pays enough for doctors and providers to be able to provide for those patients and then pay their staff as well and make ends meet here in the state. I want to make sure that beyond Medicaid expansion, we fully fund mental health care. We're 50th in the nation in access to a mental health care provider. I can't tell you how many times, including in Lufkin not too long ago, where at a meeting like this one, someone will come up and say, Beto, I want you to know that my brother, who suffers from schizophrenia and is uninsured, gets arrested by purpose, on purpose, literally tries to get arrested by one of these sheriff's deputies so that he can be taken to the county jail, because that's the one place that he's guaranteed a bed, maybe some medication, some psychotropic medication, if he is lucky, but just some care. The fact that that's our largest provider of mental health care services, the fact that the largest inpatient facility in the state of Texas is the Harris County Jail in downtown Houston, Texas, says all that you need to know about how badly funded and how low a priority mental health care is in the state of Texas. When we win, all of that changes. We fully fund mental health care. We make sure that people who need the help get the help. No matter your age, no matter the differences between us, we want to make sure that you're well enough to live to your full potential. So, for those of you who are going to be asked by friends and family, neighbors, colleagues, classmates, after today's event, after today's town hall, what's this Beto guy all about? Share with them what I just shared with you. You know, he said he wants great jobs. He wants world-class schools. He wants everybody to be able to see a doctor and be healthy enough to live to their full potential. There's a lot that the people of Texas will disagree on, but on that much, there's all the common ground in the world. And when we make the case that we've currently got a government who sows division, pits us against each other, is excited by the polarization and the fracturing of this state, and is making headlines for Texas for all the wrong reasons around the country, we could lose all of that infighting. We could come together, we could unify, and we could get some big things done for one another. I think that is the most powerful thing that we can leave this meeting with. Last thing that I want to tell you is we've talked about what we're for. We're very well aware of what we're up against right now. The question that is open at this moment is what we're going to do about it. Now, there's no candidate, there's no political party, there's no amount of money that is going to win this race. It's got to be the people. And all of us here today are the people. And it won't be just voting or registering to vote or liking the stuff that we put up on social media. It's got to be getting after it, doing the work, and knocking on doors. Knocking on doors in this kind of heat, knocking on doors when it gets even hotter in the month of July, showing up at a total stranger's doorstep and having a conversation about the future of this state. Now that stranger, that voter, may or may not ever see the TV ads that we put up on there. They may not get a slick mailer. They may not see what we post on Facebook. But I guarantee you, they will never forget the fact that another human being showed up for them. Eyeball to eyeball, face to face, human to human, at this polarized moment. That is transformational. That is so powerful. That is the way that we win. And I'm going to ask you to do something for me right now. There is a short number that I want you to text the word Texas to. It's 20377. If you text Texas to 20377, then you're going to get a text right back from our campaign. And we're going to give you a way to sign up and knock on doors with us. Because I want to make this really clear. No matter how excited we are at this moment, no matter the energy that we feel, the only way that we win this, the only way that we overcome these challenges and do the great things that we deserve for ourselves and the generations that follow is to do the work necessary. And I'll be really clear-eyed about this. It is not easy. It's not always going to be fun. The conversations are not always going to be ones that end the way that we want them to. We're going to be talking to people we may never have met before. But if we do that, I guarantee you that 7 million number, we start bringing these people into the electorate. We start folding them on to the rolls. We start turning them out in this election. We only lost in 2018 by 216,000 votes. 7 million people out there who did not cast a ballot. And I tell you what, the majority of them feel the way that we do on these issues that we just talked about. So please text Texas to 20377. And then this is a warning for another request I'll make after I have a chance to listen to you and answer some questions. We're going to want some hosts who would be willing to lead some of these canvases, some of these block walks. So everyone in Boerne who just texted Texas to 20377, they're going to need a place to go next weekend, doors to knock on. If you'll be that volunteer, we'll have them come to your home, to your office, to the park across your street. You'll rally them, and you all will go out together and go knock on those doors. So we're going to need some leaders in the community. After we do the Q&A, I'm going to ask for a show of hands of people who'd be willing to host those canvases, to be our leaders here on the ground. That's how we're going to get this done. Boerne, thank you for having us out here today. So grateful to have this chance to join you. Looking forward to the conversation, to your questions, and to winning this thing with you, for you, and by you. Gracias. Les agradezco. So Cynthia Cano right here in the white shirt and the black hat, she's got a microphone. If you've got a question, raise your hand. She'll bring it to you, and we'll get as many people into the conversation as we can. Okay.
Hi, Becca. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm doing good. How are you?
I don't know if you remember me. I'm from San Antonio.
Andale. Good to see you. And I love that shirt you're wearing.
I'm actually block walking for you tomorrow, so mi primera vez. I'm nervous, but I'm going to do it because I believe in your vision for the future of Texas.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for everything that you're doing. So, on to my question. Voter apathy is a problem here in Texas. Specifically within my ethnic group, los Latinos. No sé por qué no van a votar. I don't understand. I don't get it. I've had many conversations with mi gente, family, friends. How do you hope to gain the Latino vote in Texas?
Tell you, first of all, thank you for being an example of what we were just talking about. You just committed to block walking this weekend. It's the first time you're going to do it. You got some butterflies because you're going to be talking to total strangers. I still feel that way, and I've knocked on tens of thousands of doors over the course of my life. And every door I knock on, what's going to happen in this conversation? Usually, I'm so pleasantly surprised by the kindness that our fellow Texans demonstrate, even if they're not for us or with us. One of the things that characterizes this state is, by and large, we're pretty good to each other. Our elected leaders might not be, but we, the people, are. So thank you. Your question about how do we engage with part of this state that is so often overlooked or counted out or taken for granted. And I want to begin the answer by describing how we got to this place. Both parties have a role in this. So if the Republicans' goal over the last 10 or 20 years was to seek to disenfranchise voters in this state, or to divide us by ethnicity or race or class, and these voter suppression laws that Greg Abbott just signed last year overwhelmingly target black and brown voters and young voters and voters with disabilities across the state of Texas. That much is true, but so is this. Democrats, present company excluded, have taken those same voters for granted. And what Democrats have said by and large is, you're brown, so you're voting for us. Your parents voted for Democrats, you're going to vote for Democrats. I don't even need to show up or listen to you. I have got you in the bag. I'm going to go work on some other, exciting part of the electorate of the moment. For a while it was white suburban women. You got to go out and win them. That's the whole ball game. Well, no, that's not the whole ball game. All of us are the ball game. So we're not making that mistake, and we're also not doing what some national Democrats do, showing up in Latino majority communities and saying, you you're Latino, so all you care about is immigration. I'm just going to talk about immigration to you. No, what I've heard as I've listened to the communities that I've visited, including my own of El Paso, Texas, is that we all care about primarily the same things. What kind of job is my kid going to be able to work when she graduates from high school? Tell me about the quality of her high school and whether her teacher is working a second or third job to make ends meet. In this least insured state, the least insured part of the state is the Rio Grande Valley and Laredo and South Texas and these border communities. We have people dying of diabetes at the age of 35. They've never had insulin in their lives. That was developed 100 years ago. It costs nothing to produce. Why are we holding back? They want to know what the answer is to that. But most importantly, the respect we show when we show up and when we listen and learn and reflect back what we're hearing. And so I just want you to know that we are doing that. And whether it is here in Boerne, whether it was San Antonio where we were last night with the Bexar County Democrats, whether it's where we're going today in Pearland or going back to the Valley and the border communities, this part of the electorate has been taken for granted by my party. I'm just going to say that out loud. But we are not going to do that. And we're going to show up and talk about the issues that matter most. And we're also going to make sure, and we got to remember this, that there are a lot of voters in this state, especially in these border communities, who might prefer to hear this message in Spanish as well as in English. And I know that, again, from showing up in these communities and having someone come up afterwards and say, hey, I think I liked what you said, but I wasn't sure that I totally understood it. Vamos a hablar sobre los temas más importantes, incluyendo los trabajos que nuestros hijos y nietos quieren trabajar, la calidad de las escuelas y que necesitamos apoyar a las maestras y todos tener la oportunidad de ir a un doctor. Son los temas más importantes en cualquier condado en que estamos en esta campaña. And I'm going to make sure that we say that everywhere that we go. Thanks for asking the question. Appreciate it.
Okay, right in front. Hi, my name is Nancy. Sorry, I'm definitely going to cry. I'm a foster parent in San Antonio. So
Thank you for what you do. Yeah.
I'm so happy to hear you talk about the crisis of Governor Abbott's making. Last year he learned that kids were sleeping in CPS offices because there are no homes for them, and he simply passed a rule that kids can't sleep in CPS offices without any support or resources. So now they are guarded in empty hotels and apartment buildings by social workers who are being forced to do mandatory overnight shifts, watching these kids with no families who are going through trauma that most people cannot imagine. It was recently reported that at a refuge for girls who were victims of sexual trafficking, the staff members were giving them alcohol and drugs. These are kids in CPS custody who were victims of sexual trafficking, and the staff was giving them alcohol and drugs and trafficking them under Governor Abbott's watch. You said that you're going to fix CPS, and that was kind of it. And I would love to hear more about what hope there is for the thousands and thousands of kids who are being completely failed in this state right now.
Nancy, thank you so much. There is a lot of love for you right now here. I just want you to know that. I want you to feel that. I mean, I as you were speaking, I was looking and feeling the people around you, and we're with you. And you're doing what so many of us should be doing, right? You're there for literally the most vulnerable among us. How do we fix this? We know it's in really bad shape. You've probably been following the decisions of Judge Jack, a district court judge who for the last 6 years has been on this like nobody in the state of Texas. 6 years ago, she says from the bench, these kids emerge from the foster care program more damaged than when they went in. Just a few months ago, so this is 6 years later, she said that situation that I described 6 years ago is gone from bad to worse. We heard about this facility in Bastrop that is a private facility because the state of Texas under Abbott is privatizing care for the most vulnerable in the state of Texas. And these kids who have gone through trauma that I can only imagine are traumatized again once they're in our custody. This is as wrong as it gets. A couple things I've learned by listening to people like you who understand this better than I ever will. One, it is too difficult right now to foster children in the state of Texas, and yet you still do it. We've got to remove so many of those obstacles and hurdles and hoops through which we make you and other foster parents jump. We still got to make sure we do our due diligence. We got to make sure those kids are going to a good place, but we ask too much of you, and we should be helping you more than we are standing in your way. Second, these CPS caseworkers, Child Protective Services, I've met them across the state. One in Abilene not too long ago who came up to me, tears in her eyes, and she said, as my colleagues leave the profession because of the pressure we're under and the fact that the governor won't fix it, and I'm dealing with kids sleeping in the hallways and under the desks, as they leave, and if I stay, there's more workload for me, and it's going to break me, Beto. But I cannot leave, because if I leave, then who's going to be there for those kids? So we've got to make sure that we support these CPS caseworkers, that one, that they're paid enough to be able to stay in that job, that we hire enough of them so that we balance the load across all of them who are working on this right now. Third, we've got to make sure that we prioritize family placement when it makes sense. Again, with the caveat that we do our due diligence, but if there is a way to place that child with a family member who's going to provide some continuity and some sustainability for that kid, we've seen as a best practice across the country, that makes a lot of sense. And then somebody said, and I don't know if you agree with this, another foster parent that I met in Dallas, they said, Beto, we've got to foster the family, not just the child. When you are the least insured state in the country, when your number one provider of mental health care services is the county jail, you're going to have some outcomes with family dynamics where those households are not safe enough for those kids to stay in. We begin addressing things like a minimum wage, like housing in the state of Texas, like access to health care. We're going to improve outcomes for the entire family, including those children who are right there. So it's accountability, it's resources, it's common sense, it's listening to the people who are doing the work right now that provides the greatest value, like you, Nancy. I think if we do all those things, in fact, I know if we do all these things, we turn this around, and we have a foster care program that we are proud of in the state of Texas. So thank you for asking. Thank you for what you do.
To your right. Up here to your right.
My name is Ed, and I'd like to know your views on the suspension of Title 42 and whether or not the state of Texas and our country is prepared for the human suffering that could result in, as well as the political fallout from it.
Ed, thanks for the question. And to bring everybody up to speed, Title 42 is a provision of U.S. law that the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, and President Trump enacted or activated under his administration that summarily turns back any migrant, asylum seeker, person coming into this country based on the public health risk that they pose in the midst of a pandemic. So Border Patrol agents, upon whom we put our entire immigration system so unfairly to them, who have one of the most challenging and important jobs that I can imagine, and are expected to bear the brunt of a system that is so failed that hasn't been updated since 1986, when Ronald Reagan was president. Those Border Patrol agents under Title 42 were asked to turn back every single person who came across. You don't detain them, you don't question them, you don't determine whether they have a legitimate asylum claim. They came from Honduras, they're fleeing brutality. If they return, they're going to die. None of that matters under Title 42. We just send you back. Here's the consequence of that. That person that you just sent back last night on Thursday, they try again on Friday. There is no way to know whether that person has a legitimate claim for refuge. And if they do, we want to make sure that we follow United States law and allow them to make that case. And if that case is sustained, they stay here. If that case fails, they are sent back to their country of origin. That's the law, and we should follow it. Democrats and Republicans alike, I think, should get behind that. But if they come here to pose some kind of threat or danger to us, they're smuggling human beings, they're trafficking narcotics or fentanyl, we don't get to know about that either. We send them right back. And you have repeat crossing attempt after repeat crossing attempt. Part of the reason that we saw such a spike in the numbers at our border with Mexico last year is because of Title 42. And I take that directly from the Border Patrol agents that I listened to on the U.S.-Mexico border. So ending Title 42, following our own laws, makes a lot of sense. I think it will reduce a lot of the chaos and confusion that we have at our border. It will improve public safety and security where our country meets the rest of the world. It will allow us to help those who have legitimate asylum and refuge claims, and it will allow us to detain and prosecute those who would do us harm. But Ed asks another important question in terms of our preparedness for this, because after years of Title 42 being the practice of the land, there are a lot of people, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, who've been turned back through Title 42, who once Title 42 is ended, are going to be able to lawfully come to this country, and in many cases are going to be able to present for asylum. Now, we want them to be able to follow the law, but do we have the capacity in Eagle Pass or Del Rio? And this is the question that the mayors of these communities are asking of me to handle this. Does the President and the administration and Congress and Customs and Border Protection have a plan for this? And I've got to be honest with you, because that's what you expect from me. I don't know that we've heard that yet from the administration. I think that's a very legitimate question that I'm hearing from these county judges, county sheriffs, and Border Patrol agents. And I think we do them a grave disservice if we ignore the challenges that they are presenting to us that this will cause. Now in El Paso, where I live, in Laredo, Texas, the largest inland port of entry, we probably have the capacity. I think we're going to be just okay. But where you're seeing some of the greatest numbers is in these smaller towns like Del Rio and Eagle Pass. So I am doing my best to try to prevail upon the administration to ensure that there is a plan in place before they change this. One, for the benefit of our fellow Texans and fellow Americans who live there. Two, to make sure that we are treating those migrants, some of them in desperate situations. Imagine how desperate you would be to travel 2,000 miles with your little kiddos on foot, on top of trains, not on the inside of them, because the only choice you have is to do that, because to remain where you are might cost the life of your little girl. I want to make sure we're doing right by them under our laws in this land of immigrants, but I also want to make sure that we're doing it the right way, because if the administration screws this up, the opportunity to get meaningful immigration reform, to be trusted on doing the big things that we need to do to update those laws that have not been changed since 1986 becomes that much harder. So there's a lot that rests on doing this, and I'm doing my best to make sure that we are really honest, including with our friends and allies, about the work that they need to do. Thanks for asking the question.
Hi, Beto. My name is Anthony, and I'm curious to know what you plan to do about the power grid that left Texans without water and without power the last time.
The governor of Texas, the energy capital of the world, couldn't keep the lights on. Couldn't keep the dead of hypothermia. All across the state of Texas. No part of this state, by and large, was spared. And while all of that was happening, I don't want to make sure that you hear this and that you repeat this, because it is the fact and it is the truth. While this was happening, Greg Abbott, our governor, gives the green light, in fact demands of ERCOT and the Public Utility Commission 200 times the going rate. And you know who got rich off of this? Greg Abbott's biggest donors. Some of them and their companies made billions of dollars. $11 billion total was made by these energy companies while people were suffering across the state of Texas. Ron Nirenberg, the mayor of San Antonio, calls this the largest transfer of wealth in Texas history. But we're not done there yet. After they make their $11 billion, someone has to pay the bill at the end of the day. So Abbott and company decide that you and I, as the ratepayers in this state, are going to start paying more each and every month. If you look at your bill today. If you look at the May bill versus the May bill 2 years ago, you're going to see an increase of 40, 50, 60 bucks. It'll vary by community and every month for the next 20 years. That's how long it's going to take us to pay this back. He looked out for the corporations. He looked out for his donors, and he left us literally in the cold. And he is now the greatest driver of inflation across the state of Texas. So the question is, as all these questions are, what are we going to do about it? A couple things. One, we need to connect ERCOT, our grid, with the national grid so that we can draw down power when we need it. This is as close to a no-brainer as you get to in Texas. Two, we've got to weatherize and winterize every part of the grid, including the gas supply. He didn't want to do it because his buddies would have to invest more in their infrastructure, but we're going to make sure we do it because it's going to save the lives of our fellow Texans. Third, we need a cop on the beat. So when we trade electricity in the state of Texas, this is kind of in the weeds, there's an independent market monitor to make sure that contracts are honored and deals that are done are followed through on. But we don't have an independent market monitor in the gas market, and that's how those pipeline companies could hold hostage our local utilities. They'd say, you know what, I know you want the gasoline for that generator so you can spin off electricity for your customers so they don't die, but you're going to have to pay me 200 times more than what we originally agreed on. We shook hands, you signed a piece of paper, but screw that, I can charge you whatever I want to. I've got a gun to your head right now, and you're going to pay me what I demand. That's exactly what they did. I propose an independent market monitor for gas trading in the state of Texas so that we have a cop on the beat and are able to stop it before it happens. And then lastly, those $11 billion that they stole from us, that's not a figure of speech. There is state statute, state law, that says during a declared emergency or disaster, you cannot price gouge, you can't charge more than the going rate to your fellow Texans for anything that they need to survive, and explicitly mentioned in the statute is fuel. And that's exactly what these people did to all of us. So I'm going to make sure that we take them to court and get every dollar of those $11 billion back and return it to you. That's what we're going to do, Anthony. Thanks for asking the question. Appreciate it.
Right in the grassy area, up in the grassy areas.
There we go.
Hey Beto, I am thrilled that you are here in Kendall County. And
Thank you.
And on a lighter note, when is Texas going to legalize marijuana?
I mean, it's lighter for some. You all probably know this, but most states in this country have made marijuana legal. They've either decriminalized it, they've medicinalized it, or they've just outright made it legal for adults with significant controls on that to protect the public and especially our kids. We're one of the last states that puts people behind bars for possession of this substance that's legal over much of the developed world right now. It costs you and I $500 million to lock these folks up. And you probably know this, but though all Texans of all ethnicities and races use marijuana at roughly the same rate, disproportionately, black and brown Texans are stopped, and they're frisked, and they're jailed, and upon release they have to check a form on every job application, every student loan application, saying that they've got this conviction. It makes it harder to get that job, harder to get that loan. Your future is kind of narrowed. Options are foreclosed. We're also losing out on $500 million, conservatively speaking, of revenue if we were to tax the controlled sale of marijuana like other states are doing it right now. That's $1 billion total to the positive if we could get it right. So I ask you to do this. I said earlier when folks say, you heard Beto and what did you think? What is this guy about? And I said, great jobs, world-class schools, the ability to see a doctor. Depending on your audience, add a fourth one. He's going to legalize marijuana as soon as we win this race. So we're going to get that done. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hi, Beto. My name is Dora. I was born in Brownsville, grew up in Laredo. Now we live in San Antonio, so I've seen everything you're talking about. That was my whole life unfolded in front of you. I was a teacher for a long time. I heard the stories of kids who crossed the river with their parents, little ones, big ones, all different ages, because it was a promise of a better life for them. What my question about, though, has to relate with families. My friends and I established the Legalizing Foundation in San Antonio to help address different needs that we see the government is failing to address. One of those is inclusion.
Mm.
What can you do to help LGBTQ families and kids feel more included and less at the mercy of the government?
Tell you what, like Nancy and like so many people here, you're an example of how these tough times bring out the very best in us. The fact that you've taken this on. It's not your job. You know, no one's probably paying you to do this. Probably comes at extraordinary expense to you personally and to your family, but you're doing it because it's the right thing. That's who we are as Texans, and we don't have to say Democrats even. Just who we are as Texans. We want to look out for one another and do right by each other, and you are doing that right now. And you're doing it at a time of crisis for those within the LGBTQ community. You know that our government has proposed a Don't Say Gay bill for this next legislative session. Of all the burning crises in the state of Texas, the fact that we say gay too much is not one of them, I don't think. But it's one of these made-up crises, like which kids are using which bathroom, or playing on which athletic teams, or these things where we're trying to scare people about, or our governor's trying to scare people about transgender children and their parents. At best, it's a distraction from the real problems like fixing the grid, or expanding Medicaid, or doing some of these common sense things. But at worst, and you're familiar with the worst, it's really deeply damaging and even deadly to people. We know that the rates of suicidal ideation and suicide amongst these kids is really, really high, terrifyingly high. And we don't like to talk about it, and there are kids here with us right now, and I'm going to choose my words carefully, but I'm just telling you, if we fail to confront it, we're never going to overcome it, we're never going to fix it, and we've got to acknowledge who this is hurting right now. When you're at that young age, and all of us were there at one point, right? Kind of confused about who you are in the world, your place, whether people like you or not, how you fit in or whether you don't. And the most powerful person in the state of Texas says that you are wrong. Just fundamentally to your bones, you are screwed up. What does that do to your head and your conception of what is possible for you over the course of your life? That has the power to mess you up. And you're intervening right now to make sure that that doesn't mess up those kids. And these loving parents that I've talked about are doing their best. I meet them at the Capitol every time there's one of these Don't Say Gay bills or one of these transgender criminalization bills. I meet these parents. They're the bravest, most courageous, and most gracious souls that I've ever met. Their patience. If I were them, I would be angry, right? I'd be spitting nails. I'd be so mad at those who are trying to hurt my kid. But they show extraordinary patience, explaining to these lawmakers, look, even when you just raise the prospect of passing this bill, this is what it does to my child. And this is what she starts thinking about herself and what she might do to herself as a result. So, again, what do we do about this? I mean, one, we've got to talk about one another with the pride that we truly feel for the people of Texas. I'm so excited that there are so many people across this state who have so much to contribute. And the differences between us mostly are meaningless. It's certainly when it comes to our sexual orientation or who we love or how we pray or what country we came from, for that matter. All that only makes us stronger and richer and more successful. And if we treat one another with respect, it also makes us safer. And the governor, with access to that big microphone, the biggest microphone in the state of Texas, has extraordinary power to convey that message. And I guarantee you, I will do that. But we will not stop there, because there are laws on the book that you might know about, others may not. But right now in the state of Texas, it's legal to fire somebody because they're gay. It's legal not to hire someone because they're gay. It is legal not to adopt a child to a household that is same-sex, just for that reason alone. When we have a crisis of too many kids who cannot find loving households right now, we've got to change this legislation. And as you know, you don't do it by fiat. You can't do it by executive order. You've got to do it by talking with, listening to people, and finding common ground. She said she got deputized to register people to vote, and she's assembling a team. That's how we are going to do it and overcome it. We're going to follow your lead. Thank you.
All right, I'm in the middle on the stairs, and these are fantastic questions. I wish we could ask each one, but I have time for two more. We will stay afterwards. After the questions, we're going to be up on the stage in front of the flag. If y'all would like to stay and say a quick hello or take pictures, please do so. This is my second to the last question.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I just turned 18, so I'm going to be voting for the first time in November.
Go, Sarah! Yeah.
The 18 to 24 age group has the lowest voting rate here, so I was just wondering how you plan to encourage young people my age to vote, especially the young women that are having to fight for their rights right now.
Hey, Sarah, that's great news that you're here. It's great news that you're registered or will be registered and that you're going to vote. And that you're asking this question because I'm just going to take the spirit of the question as you want to be part of the answer to the question, right? You're going to know those 18, 19, and 20-year-olds far better than I ever will. You're going to know what moves them, what they need to hear in order to take this election seriously. They can be forgiven, as can anyone else who doesn't vote typically, for wondering whether getting out there is going to make a difference. I vote, I don't vote, what really changes here? Just seems to get bad, and maybe even go from bad to worse. I think we need to center on the issues that matter most to those that we're listening to and talking to. In this case that you just mentioned, reproductive freedom. I'm 49 years old, right? I'll be 50 this year. I'm the same age as Roe versus Wade, so all I've known in my life is this as the law of the land. All that you've known, of course, has been this as the law of the land. As we listen to those a little bit older than you, a little bit older than me, we understand a Texas where this was criminalized and where the outcomes were deadly for the women of Texas. Sharing those stories and bringing these generations together, that might be pretty powerful in what you and I are trying to do. Signing up to become one of these hosts to lead a canvas, and maybe that canvas is led at UTSA or UT or Texas State or wherever you know young people who gather and want to be part of the answer to this. But I'll tell you that this works because in 2018, we had this debate within our campaign. I was running for Senate at the time with many of you, and I wanted to go to college campuses. And smart folks on our team said, Beto, total waste of time. Young people, they're great, maybe they're enthusiastic, maybe they'll show up in great numbers at your events, but they don't vote. They never do. And our answer to that was, well, maybe they're not voting because no one's ever shown up to their campus and listening to them and including what they have to say in the solutions to the challenges that we face. So that's what we did, campus to campus, even going to senior high school classrooms to listen and engage with people. Young voter turnout in 2018 as a result was up 504% from the previous midterm election. So if you are willing to be with us on this, I would love to follow your lead. And that's following your lead in person. It's following your lead on social media platforms like TikTok, where I don't know if you know the basketball player Sedona Prince. She's from Texas, plays for Oregon, 3 million TikTok followers after she was in the NCAA basketball tournament and showed the difference between the facilities for women and the facilities for men. Her courage and her willingness to stand up has produced a sea change in the NCAA, and you now have nearing equity in facilities for women. She is helping us to engage with other young Texans across the state. So I would love for you to join us in this effort. I'm so glad that you're here. Thank you for coming out. Appreciate it. So, Cynthia, right before we take this last question, here is the ask. Where's Chrissy?
She's right here.
Okay, so Chrissy, would you wave with both hands? That's Chrissy with both hands to your right here. If you are willing to be one of those hosts, so the people who texted Texas to 20377, they're going to need a place to go, someone around whom they can rally. We will hold your hand. We will explain how this is done. It's a ton of common sense. It's literally just going to folks' doors, knocking on them, and having a conversation like we're having right now. We'll tell you the doors that those voters are at. All you got to do is be the rally point for this. If you're willing to be one of those hosts, will you raise your hand right now?
Got one over here, Beto. Right here. Two right
I've
over here.
got two right here. Two. Do I have a third? I've got a third right here. I've got a fourth right here. All right. That may be good. Four is a good start for us. Five. I've got five. So after we take this last question, if you all wouldn't mind meeting up with Chrissy right here, she'll sign you up, walk you through this. I promise it's going to be fun. It's relatively painless just in terms of learning this stuff. The challenging thing is being at those doors, but that's going to make you feel good at the end of the day to have those conversations and know that you're part of winning this. So thank you to all of our hosts.
Okay, and then before we wrap
question.
up, Susan is going to make one announcement right after we do the question.
Okay, great.
Hi, it's nice to meet you.
Likewise.
I wanted to tell you quickly where my family's at today. My husband's serving on the Air Force Base right now. A little stressed. My trans child is sitting in a library, not in a classroom, because my trans child was subjected to a homophobic rant from a teacher this week.
Ooh.
That was recorded and given to the school, and their answer is to remove my child from the classroom because they're a problem. The military has sent out notification to all of us families that are affected by what's happening in the state because we planned on retiring here. My husband served almost 20 years. We picked this state, bought a house, wanted to finish out our children's growing up, and to retire here. But they've offered us humanitarian reassignment because we are treated like refugees in this state. Worse. And we don't know where to go. We're safe because if Texas falls down to this, where's next? We're considering Canada at this point. I mean, I'm with you, margaritas, right? But I don't want to teach my child that you just give in when it gets rough, but I have to protect them. So what message of hope do you have for my family? Because we're ready to cut and run, and I know we're not the only ones.
We want you here in Texas. We don't want you to go to Canada. We don't want you to go to New Mexico. We don't want you to go anywhere else. We love you. We are so grateful for your family's service. I know enough about those who put their lives on the line for this country that when one member of that family serves, it is the entire family who is serving. So you are doing what so few of your fellow Americans are willing to do right now by stepping up and serving this country in this way. And I want to make sure that this country has your back. Every single right that your family's putting their lives on the line for to defend, because your husband swore an oath not to the president or a political party, but to the Constitution and to the rights that are protected in it for all of us, including your child. And I want to make sure that Texas is known as a state that did not cut and run, but stood and fought, stood to be counted, as everyone here is standing to be counted right now. But I just want to make this really clear to everyone again. No one's going to do this for us. This is not going to resolve nicely if we step back and just watch it play out. We have to be engaged. We have to be the people at the doors. We have to be having these conversations. If we do not, I predict the outcome of this race right now. We will lose. If we do not and we lose, what we see right now is not the end of this dark road that Greg Abbott has put us on. You know, marriage equality follows next in the state of Texas, I guarantee you. Full funding for public education, he just telegraphed that yesterday in a news conference. That's going to come down next. And it may be a failure of imagination for us to think about the other things that will follow from there. So this is the last line right here in the state of Texas. This is for all the marbles, and not just for those of us here, the 30 million who live in these 254 counties. The country, frankly, is counting on us. This is the most important election in the land. And if you're like me, there's no other place I'd rather be right now than fighting this fight and winning it with you and for you and by you. So let's get it done. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you all so much, Bernie. We are so grateful to you. Susan Dollar's going to make one last announcement.